Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson facing off in 2020. I'm giving you my post-fight analysis here on this bonus episode of the Game Time Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time! Woo!
This is the Game Time Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to the Game Time Guru podcast on this bonus episode of the show where I'm going to be giving you my post-fight analysis of the Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson matchup from last night. Listen, I had to sleep on this for a while because I needed to know what we had just watched. So before I get into that, though, I want to give a special shout out to all the listeners who've made this month an amazing month. This whole year has been an amazing year. The growth of the show is just unbelievable, and I appreciate all the listeners who are out there. I appreciate my title sponsors over at 208 Printing. The guys get me taken care of. Whenever I need an order for my gear, I give it to them. They make it super simple. They tell me what I need to do, and they get it done. If you guys have any branding that needs to be done, like shirts or anything, hoodies, whatever, for your business or for your team, whatever it may be, go over to madeby208.com. Contact my guys over at 208 Printing, or you can DM me, and I can get you over some information for them. They are fantastic. And if you guys haven't left me a review yet on my podcast, please do so. I would really appreciate it. If you enjoy the show, you want to give some feedback, if you have an Apple device, it's the best way to do it. Go to Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. Always appreciate the reviews as it helps with the credibility of the show. Now, you guys are aware that I'm a huge Roy Jones Jr. fan. He's the reason I got into boxing in the first place. Super big fan of his, right? I love Mike Tyson as well. I'm a fan of the sport. I understand the history of the sport. I understand how impactful both of these guys were in the sport in their prime. Now, listen, I had already talked about this and how I wasn't really excited. I kind of already knew what we were going to see, but I'm going to break down a few things that caught my attention last night and kind of share it with you guys as fans. First things first. Listen, I don't know if any of you bet on the fight. If you were, I won't say dumb, but just, I guess, didn't know what was going on. We knew that this was going to be a draw. If you guys were listening to the rules, like Chael Sonnen, Luke Thomas, Brendan Schaub, like all these guys from the different shows that I listened to for fighting, when the rules came out, they knew that it was going to be an exhibition match. They knew it was going to be no winner declared. There weren't supposed to be official judges, and there weren't official judges. If you guys look at the judges that were last night, those are honorable judges. They're celebrity judges. They're not official judges. So they were scoring the bout, but they weren't real judges. They were already going to be there in the first place. When they said, oh, well, then now they've added judges, they already had those three as honorable judges. So the whole no headgear and stuff, they tried to hype it up after the announcement was made about the exhibition fight because everybody started being disinterested in the fight. And so they started hyping it up. But if you listen to the rules, you knew this was going to be a draw. So when Vegas came out with odds, I was like, what in the world? I was running at the gym on the treadmill, and Vegas came out with some odds on the fight. And I'm like, what odds? It's not even an official fight. There's not going to be a declared winner. And so when everybody was like, oh, it's so staged after they put a draw at the end of the fight, I'm like, what did you expect? We knew this was going to be this way. Plus, they said it was going to be a heavy sparring match. Now, they did try to market it a little bit differently, like 2 days before the fight when everybody was mad about the rules. But if you listen to the interviews from Mike Tyson, hey, are you going to go and try to get the knockout? Are you going to try to get the knockout? He never once said he's going to get the knockout. He's like, I'm just going to come with bad intentions. I'm going to come after him, and I'm going to throw punches with bad intentions. I'm going to come after him. He never once said, I'm going to try to knock his head off. He never tried to say anything like that. You knew that they weren't going to be going for the knockout. And it was apparent. So that was the first thing. If anybody was upset about the draw, I apologize. That's kind of what we all expected with this bout. First things first, before we get into the actual fight, it made me kind of sad to see Roy Jones walk in. When he was walking to the ring, I've already known this for a while. He's been very open about his knees. He has no knees anymore. Like, his knees are gone. And just wobbling to the ring as he limped his way through there to the ring was kind of sad to watch. And just so everybody knows, he may be 51, but he kind of lost his legs in the early 2000s when he was in his mid-30s. That's not new. After the Tarver fight, if you ever watch some of his fights, he was flat-footed. He didn't have any bounce in his step. Like, he'd throw a few punches here and there, and then he'd clinch. Throw a few punches and clinch, and that's just how he was doing it. That's why he kind of tapered off near the end of his career, because that's just how he fought. but his knees are so bad that he couldn't even literally walk to the ring without a limp. Like it's just weird. He fights very flat-footed, straight-legged. He doesn't have a lot of pep in his step anymore at all. And you'll see he had a couple glimpses in there where he'd circle, he'd throw a punch and circle, throw a jab and then circle, and then he'd be tired. He did that like 2 or 3 times, and he was gassed for the rest of the round. It was kind of sad to watch, but you kind of already saw that. Like if people knew who Roy Jones was, he even in the early 2000s, he wasn't the same fighter as he was in the 90s. His legs started to go on him, and that was the unfortunate reality. Now you add, many years on his life, wear and tear, and just everything there. That's kind of what we saw last night. Very flat-footed. You could see when he was like when they were moving in the ring, you could hear it. It was very heavy. Boom, boom, boom. They weren't light on their feet at all. Sounds like me trying to run on a basketball court. Now, got to give them credit. They both looked like they were in phenomenal shape. I know everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, dude, they look like they had dad bods." At least Roy Jones did. Now, Roy Jones had a 6-pack, dude. The guy was down to 210 pounds. Like, he looked pretty good for 210 for being 51 years old and 210 pounds. Like, I got to give him credit for being in good shape as far as like his appearance. And obviously Mike Tyson losing 100 pounds. I mean, he was on some stuff before they had to start training for this fight because he couldn't test positive for anything. So kind of got off of his gear and what he was taking and whatnot. But they both came in. They weren't like dad bods. They looked like they had actually at least been working out and somewhat fit, right? So good for them for taking care of themselves, knowing that it was going to be a global audience paying attention to the fight. One thing I was impressed with, guys, was Mike Tyson's cardio. I know it wasn't a real fight. If you guys, anybody with an understanding of the sport of boxing who's either boxed even at the lowest level up into the highest level understands that was not a real fight. They were hitting a lot of body shots, not a lot of head hunting going on. You knew that. Like Mike Tyson could have easily been throwing for the fences at his head, and he didn't. He did not take his head off. He could have done that. So could have Roy. Roy could have gone for some power shots towards the head. There was a few jabs here and there in the head. A couple shots were landed, a couple hooks, but nothing like major power shots to the face. It was a lot of body shots, and if they were head shots, there were a lot of like jabs and just entry punches. So it wasn't like a real fight. But again, if you don't have those expectations, which you should not have after hearing what this was actually going to be and understanding the situation of these guys in their 50s, then you won't be disappointed. The fact is, though, Mike Tyson had some good cardio. I had actually expected him to gas out a little earlier. Granted, they are doing 2-minute rounds. It's a little easier on the body. A whole nother minute does a world of a difference for you. I'll tell you that much. But what I was amazed by is how much better shape he was in cardiovascular-wise than Roy Jones. Roy, everybody was talking about Roy being just 3 years out of fighting. But see, that doesn't matter if you're not keeping up with your body, right? Roy was gassed after round 1. You could see he was taking deep breaths and trying to control his breathing after one round. And I know from experience, even in the amateur level, guys, like one round of 2 minutes long used to gas me out more than 20 minutes of jump rope. It's different than hitting the heavy bag. It's different than hitting the mitts. It's different than jumping rope. It's different. When you're going out there and you're getting punched back, there's a whole different ballgame when you have to circle around the ring and you have to clinch and all that stuff. That's just, you're going to be tired. It doesn't even matter if it's low end, like what we call heavy sparring like they were doing last night. It's tiring. And so Mike actually had a lot of gas in the tank, and Roy was gassing out. I was impressed by Mike's overall cardiovascular endurance. So props to him for that. Now, everyone's frustrated about the clinch fest. It definitely was a clinch fest. But again, I will remind you, if you watched any of Roy Jones' fights later in his career, even the Glenn Johnson fight when he got knocked out, I mean, when he became more flat-footed and less pep in his step, that's kind of how it was. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, and then like he'd do like a one-shot clinch, 1, 2, 3 clinch, because he couldn't circle out as much anymore. His style was based on reflexes and quickness. When he lost the quickness because his knees were gone, he couldn't do that. So that's how a lot of his fights went later in his career. I don't know if people just didn't see that, but I understand the reason for it. Even with heavy sparring, like taking body shots can wear you down, and you got to get up and clinch with them, or else you're gonna get rocked. Even in the body, you could get hurt pretty badly, especially with a Mike Tyson hook. You know what I mean? So it was kind of weird. I will say this though, I was super excited to see him both in the ring again. It was cool to see him walk in. Cool to see Roy Jones. I think he wins the uniform competition, honoring Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant. in the Staples Center. I liked his gloves. I liked how he was flashy. He's always kind of been that way, more of the flashy fighter. He used to be sponsored by Jordan, so he'd walk in with his Jordan gear. Obviously, last night he's got his RJJ outfit and everything, and he's got the Kobe Bryant gloves and the shoes and everything. It was all Lakers attire. It looked really cool. Mike Tyson, the infamous, just walk in, nothing flashy at all. Just walk in and get to the ring. I thought it was kind of cool. Just kind of cool and nostalgic is a good word to put for that, to describe it all. It was overall, like, I mean, what do you expect? Two mid-50s, like a mid-50s and an early 50s guy. I don't know what you expect. You can't be disappointed if you didn't have expectations. That's kind of how I felt. I knew what we were going to see as soon as the rules came out. But here's the deal. Mike Tyson wants to do this Legends League where they're going to have older fighters come in and do exhibition bouts. I don't know how that's going to do. I don't have a lot of confidence in that. I know a lot of people were excited to see Roy Jones and Mike Tyson because it's the first time they've seen him in a fight. And maybe if like they bring in Evander Holyfield and some of these older guys that are in phenomenal shape. But like that kind of fighting, that exhibition type fighting without a declared winner and it's all for charity and stuff, that can only get you so far, right? Like it can only get you so far. It's only going to get you so many viewers. People might pay for it for the first one or two times. I don't see that being something that can be sustainable. I really don't. I just don't see it being sustainable because people just don't want to watch that kind of fighting. Now, if there was stuff on the line, which you don't want to do because you got to look out for the health of the fighters, but if there was something on the line, such as, you know, a belt of some kind and some big money payouts and whatnot, like people would pay attention. If there were real rules, like 6 rounds of 3 minutes each maybe or something to that effect, and these guys have some and they can take each other's heads off and there are knockouts, then yeah, it's different. That's what the fans really want to see, even though they want the fighters to stay healthy and be taken care of. But I just don't see like that type of a fight last night. I don't see people paying for pay-per-views time and time again for a Legends League like that, like Mike Tyson wants to do. So they'd have to do a little bit of changing, rearranging with the rules and so forth, but I don't see any athletic commissions allowing that to go with these 50-year-old plus fighters coming out there. You don't want them getting their heads rocked because they're still fighters. They can still punch. I mean, you don't want to take a punch from Mike Tyson. You don't want to take a punch from Roy Jones if he could actually get one clean on you. You don't want to take a punch from any of these guys. They know what they're doing. So that's the thing. I just don't see how that's going to be. But, I mean, props to Jake Paul. One little funny story on that is Nate Robinson gets knocked straight out, lights out on the canvas, took a nap for a minute. That's the infamous, you know, big-time athlete thinks they can come in and box. And that was a big lesson right there. Okay, big lesson for that. Not every athlete is going to be a boxer. Totally different. I noticed that even at the lowest level in the amateurs when I fought for Golden Gloves, we'd have football players come in all the time, basketball players come in all the time, and they think that they can box. It's a whole different game. Because if you're a street fighter and you think that you can go in there and you're going to knock somebody out with one punch, that's not how it works. Boxers can take punches. So you see that, like, Nate Robinson's coming in there, he's throwing punches and stuff, but he realizes, like, oh, there's actually a technique to this. You're not going to come in there and beat him in the first round. It's like most of these guys are conditioned to take shots. And they're going to give them back. You got to be able to take some of those shots. And it was apparent that Nate Robinson could not take those shots. He took 3 of them. He got knocked down 3 times. 3 times he got knocked down with overhand rights. So, I mean, it's apparent that he's not really built for the boxing game, even though he might act like he's a tough guy. It happens all the time. I love him as an athlete. I think he's phenomenal, but there's a little lesson there that boxing is a whole different ball game. You can see one of the most unathletic looking dudes who's a boxer, and he would rock the average athlete. Last lesson I'd say right here for any athlete that you could take that was actually a positive last night from the Mike Tyson and Roy Jones matchup. Here's a positive. Athletes everywhere around the world, doesn't matter what sport you play. The basics and the fundamentals are essential to your success. Roy Jones Jr. was always an unorthodox fighter. He kept his hands low. He'd throw a few punches here and there, be flashy. He would throw no-look punches, no-look jabs to your face, and then he'd move and circle and dance around and so forth. But as soon as he lost his speed, his style of fighting never worked. That's why he tapered off near the end of his career, because he just couldn't fight that way anymore. When they had a rematch for the trilogy with Bernard Hopkins, him and Bernard were fighting later in their careers. Bernard actually did an interview, I believe, with Jim Rome, talking about that exact thing. He said, the fundamentals are essential. Like, you got to stay with the fundamentals of boxing. Roy doesn't have the fundamentals of boxing. He's flashy. He based his career on his flash, and that's good. It got him to where he was a champion on multiple levels in multiple weight classes. But I mean, if you don't have the foundation to fall back on, then what are you doing? So you got to focus on the basics. Look at Mike Tyson and how crisp he looked last night. He looked crisp. He looked really, really crisp. He could move and bob and weave, and those are kind of like the boring looking fights, the bobbing and weaving and throw a couple punches and bob and weave and punch. But those are the basics. So for any athlete out there who might take a lesson from this, like if there's a positive, stick to the basics, because one day you never know, you're going to have to fall back on them. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening to my post-fight analysis of the Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson matchup. Appreciate you guys tuning in for the month of November. This has been an awesome month for us here on the show. Again, we've reached 88 different countries. I mean, we continue to grow. The title sponsors over at 208 Printing, massive shout out to them once again. And again, if you have not left me a review on the podcast, please do so. I would really appreciate it. 5 stars is always helpful for the credibility of the show. So when other people are kind of looking for podcasts to listen to, they might come and stumble upon it and they see some reviews on there. They're like, oh, it's a credible podcast. And then you can get them to listen to your show. So that's the reason I do it. I'm pretty transparent about it. I love reviews. I don't get paid for reviews, but I love reviews because it helps with the credibility and the growth of the podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Stay tuned for next week's episode when I talk to Justinian Jessup, the Golden State Warriors second-round pick in this year's NBA draft. Take care.